Some men are born into violence, others learn it. But then there are the rare few who seem to breathe it, perfect it, and wear it like a second skin. This is the story of one such man, Daniel Reed, once a bright, quiet boy from Ohio, now known as America's most dangerous murderer. Daniel Reed was not always a name that instilled fear. Born in 1984 in a quiet, blue-collar neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio, he was the youngest of three siblings. His teachers remembered him as intelligent, but withdrawn. Neighbors said he was polite, but strange. What they didn't know was that behind the silence was a growing storm, a fascination with control, pain, and power. At age 13, Daniel committed his first known act of violence, the brutal killing of a stray dog behind a local mechanic's garage. The crime went unpunished, but it was just the beginning. By 19, Reed had moved to Chicago under a fake name, working odd jobs by day and slipping into the shadows by night. Over the next 5 years, a string of unsolved murders swept through the Midwest, bodies left in abandoned buildings, each marked with the same eerie signature, a red thread tied around the victim's thumbs. It wasn't until 2011 that the FBI connected the murders to Daniel. A failed kidnapping in Kansas City led to his capture. When agents raided his apartment, they found journals filled with detailed entries of each victim, including those never publicly identified. I watched him breathe slower. One entry read, "I wanted to feel God." The media dubbed him the Phantom Stitcher. Over 17 confirmed victims, possibly more. His trial became a nationwide obsession. Courtroom seats were filled daily. Families sobbed. Reporters scrambled for headlines. The prosecution painted him as a sadistic genius with a chilling lack of remorse. Reed defended himself, using the courtroom like a stage, calm, articulate, terrifying. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 17 consecutive life terms without parole. But the question remained, where do you put a man like Daniel Reed? The answer? Black Ridge Penitentiary, a military-grade Supermax prison in the Colorado mountains. It was said to be escape-proof, built into a rock face with only one road in and one road out. Its walls were lined with motion sensors, surveillance drones, and guards trained for war zones. Daniel was placed in cell 41A, isolated from the general population. He was allowed 1 hour of yard time per day, always alone, always watched. Prison officials believed they had buried the monster. They were wrong, because 2 years later, on a quiet winter morning, cell 41A was found empty. No signs of forced entry, no tripped alarms, just a single red thread left on the bed. Daniel Reed was gone, and so began the most infamous prison escape in American history. For most inmates, Black Ridge wasn't just a prison. It was a slow death wrapped in silence. Perched 9,000 feet above sea level, it was buried in snow 8 months of the year and surrounded by sheer cliff walls. No bars, no sunlight, no voices, just steel, cameras, and concrete. Daniel Reed arrived under heavy escort, 3 U.S. Marshals, a helicopter, and a 10-vehicle convoy. Warden Mitchell, a former Army intelligence officer, personally oversaw his intake. "This one's different," he told the guards. "He doesn't break rules. He studies them." From day one, Daniel never raised his voice, never made threats, never acted out. That was the first red flag. Most high-risk inmates fight for power or attention. Reed? He followed orders, kept to routine, and never caused trouble. His record was spotless. Too spotless. Surveillance showed him pacing exactly 122 steps in his cell every morning before breakfast. He used his 1 hour of yard time to sit quietly in the same corner, staring at the fence but never touching it. He declined visits, never spoke during group therapy. But what unnerved staff the most, he never slept more than 3 hours a night. Some guards called it discipline, others called it calculation. In cell 41A, Daniel had nothing but a metal bed, a toilet, a steel sink, and 2 books, The Art of War and Gray's Anatomy. Within months, he'd memorized both. He requested nothing, no pen, no paper, no visitors, but cameras caught him mouthing words to himself each night, like he was rehearsing. One psychologist noted, "He isn't adjusting to prison. He's adapting to it, like it's a puzzle." The guards weren't allowed to speak to him casually. That was policy. But over time, one of them, Officer Carl Jensen, started bending the rule. It started with short comments during meal deliveries, then longer exchanges in the hallway. Jensen, a new hire, found Reed weirdly respectful. Unlike the other inmates, Reed didn't spit or scream. He asked questions, deep ones, about guard routines, rotations, even electrical systems. At the time, no one suspected anything. But in hindsight, those conversations were the start of something much bigger. By his second year, Reed had quietly mapped the prison's rhythm. When the gates buzzed, when the lights flickered, when the guards shifted positions, he watched, absorbed, remembered. Warden Mitchell later admitted, "We mistook silence for submission. What we were really watching was a mind sharpening itself." Then, in early December, 1 week before his escape, Reed made an unusual request, a Bible. It was approved. 2 days later, the surveillance camera above his cell went dark for exactly 4.3 seconds. No one noticed. By the time they did, Daniel Reed had already begun his escape. Prisons like Blackridge aren't broken from the outside. They're unraveled from within, quietly, methodically, piece by piece. That's exactly how Daniel Reed planned his escape. He didn't dig a tunnel. He didn't bribe 10 guards. He didn't need to. All he needed was time, precision, and one weak link. That weak link was Officer Carl Jensen. Reed never threatened him. He didn't need to. Instead, he built something far more dangerous: trust. Over months of calculated conversation, Reed listened more than he spoke. He asked about Jensen's sick mother, his mounting debts, his long commutes. He showed empathy, something no one expected from a serial killer. And slowly, Jensen began to let his guard down. One night, during a routine check, Reed said something strange. "You ever feel like you're more of a prisoner than I am?" Jensen didn't answer, but that sentence stuck in his head like a hook. From there, it began. Reed asked for small favors, nothing major: an extra blanket, an old copy of the prison handbook. Once, he even asked Jensen to swap his evening meal for oatmeal because it was easier on his stomach. It all seemed harmless, but Reed was testing him. The Bible he requested 2 weeks before the escape wasn't for prayer. It was a container, hollowed out and rigged with graphite from pencil leads, used to short out the motion sensor in his cell. It gave him a window, 4.3 seconds of invisibility, just enough time to move unseen. But how do you escape a prison with biometric locks, heat sensors, and 24-hour surveillance? You don't. You walk out the front door, wearing someone else's face. 2 days before his disappearance, Reed began limping. He complained of abdominal pain. Jensen filed the medical report himself. The next morning, dressed in a borrowed lab coat, Daniel Reed was wheeled out of the infirmary on a stretcher under the identity of a terminally ill inmate being transferred to hospice. The guard escorting him? Carl Jensen. No alarms, no chase. Just a quiet signature on a clipboard and an unremarkable van driving off into the snow. By the time the real hospice transfer was discovered, Reed was already 70 miles away, on foot, dressed as a paramedic, and carrying nothing but a red thread bracelet and a change of clothes. No violence, no noise, just brilliance. One prison administrator later said, "It was as if he planned every detail like a symphony, and we were the instruments." The escape had begun long before he left the cell. The manipulation, the silence, the routines, every second inside Blackridge had been a rehearsal, and now America's most dangerous man was free. December 17th, 6:42 a.m. It was snowing lightly over Blackridge Penitentiary. Visibility was poor. Roads were icy. Most of the staff were running late. Inside the prison infirmary, a stretcher waited in the hallway, covered with a body bag marked "Transfer." The nurse on duty glanced at the paperwork, then at the shivering young guard beside it. Officer Jensen handed her the clipboard. "End-stage liver failure," he muttered. "Warden signed off already." Everything seemed routine. Surveillance footage from that moment later revealed a minor detail. The stretcher's wheels squeaked every few seconds, as if something inside was shifting weight. At 6:47 a.m., the van pulled out of Blackridge's front gate. Inside sat two people, Jensen in the driver's seat and Daniel Reed beneath a black body bag, breathing through a straw tucked under his collar. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even sick. He was escaping. The plan was timed to the second. By 7:15 a.m., the van reached a remote service road near Pine Valley. Jensen stopped beside a snow-covered utility shed. Reed stepped out, wearing a paramedic's uniform stolen from a supply closet 3 days prior. He shaved his beard, cut his hair with surgical scissors, and slipped on a fake ID badge clipped to his chest. They burned the uniform Jensen had worn and dumped the van into the frozen creek below. No witnesses, no security footage, no tire tracks. The snow erased everything. At 8:06 a.m., Jensen returned to Blackridge, claiming he'd forgotten to hand in the infirmary keys. At 8:07 a.m., guards went to check cell 41A. It was empty. The alarm didn't go off until 8:12 a.m., 5 whole minutes later. By then, Reed was already gone, disappeared into the Rockies, blending into traffic on Route 7, disguised as a first responder. Quiet, invisible. The search began immediately. Roads were locked down, drones deployed. National news lit up within hours. Every camera from Denver to Salt Lake was scanned frame by frame. They found nothing. In his cell, investigators recovered the Bible, a strand of red thread, and a map of the prison's electrical grid hand-drawn on toilet paper. But no fingerprints, no DNA, no mistakes. "He left like a ghost," one FBI agent said. "Not even a breath out of place." Jensen was arrested the next morning. He confessed within hours, sobbing through the entire interrogation. "He got inside my head," he whispered. "I thought I was in control, but he planned me like a move on a chessboard." As for Daniel Reed, he became the most wanted fugitive in America overnight. Interpol was notified. Airports were locked. Border alerts were issued. But it was already too late. Daniel Reed had vanished without a trace, and this time he wasn't hiding. He was hunting. America's most dangerous killer has escaped from Blackridge Supermax prison. The headline exploded across every major network. By noon, Daniel Reed's face was plastered on screens from Times Square to Tokyo. Airports tightened security. Buses were stopped. Border agents were ordered to detain anyone matching even a partial resemblance. The FBI formed a dedicated task force within hours, Operation Red Thread, named after the signature left on his victims. And now, on his prison bed. But Reed wasn't just a fugitive. He was a symbol of failure, of fear, of something worse than violence, intelligent violence. The kind that doesn't make noise, the kind that plans 10 steps ahead. Leads poured in from across the country. A man in New Mexico swore he saw Reed at a gas station. A bartender in Nevada claimed she served him whiskey. A toll booth camera in Utah caught a blurry face that could have been him. But every time agents followed a lead, they found nothing. Daniel Reed had studied the system. He knew how manhunts worked, how facial recognition could be fooled, how cell towers could be avoided, how digital footprints were never truly erased, unless you never made one. In his journals, recovered post-escape, one line stood out. Disappearance is not about running. It's about becoming no one. He had prepared for this. Bank accounts across 5 states were emptied, none of them in his name. A private cabin in northern Idaho was discovered with forged IDs, burner phones, maps, and canned food. He had stayed there, briefly, but never twice. In the months that followed, 2 more victims were found. Both strangled, both with red thread tied around their thumbs. Some experts argued it wasn't him. Others said it was exactly the message he wanted to send. "You didn't catch me. I let you find a peace." Carl Jensen was sentenced to 18 years for aiding the escape. In court, he said, "He made me believe he was changing, that he was human." Then he paused. "But he's not. He's a mirror. You look into him and see your own weakness staring back." As of today, Daniel Reed remains on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. His reward stands at $5 million, dead or alive. He could be in another country, another identity, or sitting right next to someone on a train, invisible as ever. No security system feels strong enough anymore. Because if Reed could vanish from the most secure prison in the country, where can't he go? And the scariest part? He's never been caught. Because Daniel Reed never runs. He waits.